Hi golfers, Rob Cheney here from GOLFTEC Singapore. In today's video, I'm going to discuss the important but seldom talked about subject of the trail arm in the swing and how it works. How the trail arm moves around you and how the elbow works through the time and space of the swing is extremely important if you're going to build something that is consistent and reliable. And I'm going to show you how to do that and share a drill with you that's going to make your practicing of this piece much, much easier.
Swing. That was a good swing.
Just before we start today's video, I want to take a couple of seconds just to say a huge thank you to one of my subscribers, Bob from Augusta, Georgia. Bob and I were talking via comments and email recently after one of my videos, and we discussed the Masters, which was at that time just about to happen. And I arrived at work this week to a package from Augusta, Georgia, which included 2 caps. This one right here, and one for my colleague Nick Taylor, who, as most of you will know, works with me here at GOLFTEC Singapore, and Bob was enjoying both of our videos and he sent through a nice gift. It's a really nice gesture. I wanted to take the time to say thank you publicly for that, and also to everyone who's subscribed to the channel and is part of the community. The comments you send in every week are incredibly important to me. I try and reply to every single one of them. I enjoy the vast majority of them, and even the ones that are less than positive let me reflect on the content and the type of instruction that I'm sending out there. So please, if you're not already, click that subscribe button, join the community, and let me know what you think of the videos in the comment section. Okay, let's get into this then, talking about the trail arm and how it should work throughout the time and space of the golf swing. Just a couple of things to note in the beginning. The 2 main movements that I would suggest the right arm is doing throughout the swing is flexing and extending, which is just bending up and down in this vertical motion. The golfing machine calls this bending and straightening of the trail arm the first power accumulator. So it's clearly an important part of the swing just to generate some power into the stroke. And then the other one that you may or may not be familiar with is how the arm orbits around the upper arm or the shoulder here, and that's known as internal external rotation of the shoulder. A lot of this has been made popular online with instruction through things like shallowing the shaft, making the shaft change its shape and change its pitch throughout the swing. So these are really the 2 areas that we're looking at: how the arm rotates about the shoulder here, and also how it flexes about the elbow. And if I were to give you my preferences on how this trail arm works, I'd start at setup by saying that the right arm, trail arm, right arm for me and right-handed golfers would be slightly flexed to start the stroke. This is actually something that I really struggle with in my own swing. I'm very guilty of having my right arm get too straight, and it's something I see in students quite often, especially when we're talking about other concepts like arms straight throughout the swing. This can often be misunderstood at setup and becomes where the students really have their elbows too close together and this trail arm too far away from their body at the start of the swing. So when you start out, you'd want to feel like there's a little bit of pressure between your upper arm, your tricep if you like, and your rib cage or your chest. And then as we start to move the club, we'd want to maintain that pressure. Something that's very common and a big mistake that I see in the bays on a daily basis here is golfers who start to move the club and do so by pulling this trail arm around their rib cage too far. They move the arm, they flex the trail arm and let it change its location from being on the front side of the rib cage to disappearing behind them, behind the midline of the body. And in doing that, they're making a lot of things more difficult for themselves. They're pulling the elbows apart in itself is messing up the radius management, which we've discussed in plenty of previous videos. Pulling the arms apart also messes with the wrist joints and the wrist positions as well. And they often doing that just to give the club its ascent or its lift away from the ground because they don't have great body motion. So just to say on that, the right arm starting against the torso is where you want to be. As you start to swing back, you'd want the right arm to keep its connection to the top of the arm to the torso. You'd want to maintain that as you start to swing back. And then, as I touched on earlier, the movements that the right arm is making whilst connected to the torso is it's going into a flexed condition where it starts out a little bit flexed, a few degrees, maybe 10 degrees flexed at setup, and then it moves towards like a 90-degree flexion. And then the second movement I discussed was the external rotation of the shoulder. So the arm or the elbow stays in the same position relative to the rib cage, and the forearm moves around the upper arm and the shoulder joint through external rotation. Those are the two movements that that right arm is making throughout the backswing as it keeps its relationship to the torso. And I used the analogy in a previous video that feels like losing an arm wrestling match. Okay, so that's your arm feeling like you're losing or getting beaten at arm wrestling would be a really nice analogy or description of how that right arm would move throughout the backswing. So having made it to the top, some of the checkpoints here to know you've done a good job would be that the elbow has maintained more or less the distance that it was from the rib cage at setup. It's a similar distance away from you at the top of the swing. The arm's not lifting or moving away a tremendous amount, maintaining that connection and that pressure between the upper arm and the torso will allow the elbow to stay in a relatively similar position relative to the rib cage. Another good checkpoint at the top of the swing to see if you've done this well would be that the trail forearm is more or less vertical. And a signal that you're would start to potentially have problems here would be when this forearm moves more into this horizontal condition rather than this vertical one. And that's the internal and external rotation of the shoulder, which is said the other way, it's the winning or the losing of the arm wrestling match. And far too many of the golfers I see who struggle start winning this arm wrestling match, steepening the shaft, and getting into lots and lots of difficulties on the downswing. So we have our checkpoints at the top of the swing, with the elbow being the same distance from the rib cage and the trail arm being more or less vertical. And as we start down, something I encourage my players to do is to move that right elbow slightly more down and forward in front of their rib cage. So there's an actual pushing of the elbow down and in front, whilst maintaining some of this wrist bend to keep the shaft on a really functional pitch there, a nice shallow delivery. Where a lot of golfers can still get this wrong, having even done a very nice job to the top, is that the arm actually starts to move away and straighten and push away from their body, creating this space or this daylight between the arm or the elbow and the body. That leads to a very wide arc delivery of the club, losing a lot of power and potentially creating a scenario where you could easily hit the ground before the ball. Teaching players to move the right elbow down and in front of them on the downswing while maintaining the appropriate amount of wrist bend to control the face is, in my opinion, one of the most difficult pieces of the swings to teach. And I think it's why it's not discussed a huge amount. It's quite complex. There's a lot of things going on here at the same time that you need to coordinate. And that can often sound complicated and complex to a lot of golfers. It's one of the criticisms I receive in some of my instruction is that it's very too complicated. I just say it's clear and offering the detail that's necessary for such a difficult, complicated part of the swing. Having moved down to where the shaft is parallel to the ground, the right arm is in front of my rib cage, the elbows are back to a similar distance they were together at setup, and then the right wrist is still bent back, ready to deliver this club into the back of the ball. There's a couple of really nice drills that you can do to help you with these feels. One of them is a one arm only drill. It's one of my favorites actually. I've discussed this a little bit with pitching and chipping before, and to be honest, it's how I would encourage you to start out with this drill if you're not familiar with it, because it can be quite difficult to do. But putting your left arm, gripping the club conventional, taking your regular grip, making sure that's in a good spot, taking your left hand off the club so your right hand is still on the club in the same position that it would be in for a standard shot, and then placing your left hand onto the elbow, just above the elbow, and squeezing or pushing the upper arm against the torso and keeping it there throughout the swing. Really pushing or holding that arm against you, and as you start to come down, even having a slight pull, this left arm, left hand pulling my trail elbow back in front of me, whilst at the same time bending the right wrist, keeping the right wrist back and increasing the amount of bend in the trail wrist. As I say, that can seem or sound quite complicated. It's another reason why I wouldn't advise you do it with a big swing to start with, and I wouldn't even put a ball in the way to begin with. Like so many of the exercises that I'll prescribe for you, you're going to do these dry drills, swinging through, trying to get a sensation of what I'm asking you to do, filming it as I always recommend, and getting the feedback of hitting the ground a few times, using that sensation of pulling the elbow in front of you, keeping the wrist bent back, and allowing the club to hit the ground. And once you've done that a few times, go ahead and start chipping a few away. I've got a 7-iron here. I probably wouldn't encourage you to do it with much less loft than that to begin with. And by all means, start with a pitching wedge if you feel more comfortable. Swing back, keep the arm close, pull it down, and go ahead and just chip some of these balls away. This is teaching really good structure of the arms and the wrist joints, and a really good unloading pattern and procedure for how this all comes back down towards the ball. You'll even notice when I hit these balls, it's easier to maintain some of the right wrist flying wedge, which again is something that is certainly a preference of mine in terms of how golfers should be delivering the club back to the ball. So keep the arm in, swing back, squeeze the arm towards you. Just go ahead and chip a few of those away. Another good drill you can use here as well is to take a credit card and place it under your right arm, somewhere between the elbow and the armpit, sort of mid bicep. Place the card there and put some pressure between the arm and the torso to keep the card in place. That's going to require a little bit of pressure to be present and to have some little bit of flex in that trail arm setup, as I touched on earlier. And then as you swing back, the goal there is to keep the card in place, which is going to help you to keep the elbow in a similar location and continue to ask the question of you and pretty much force you to start flexing the arm and externally rotating the shoulder. And you can now put two hands on the club to do this drill, which means you can start to swing a little bit further back, a little bit faster. Some of you, however, will need to keep going slowly to begin with, and a lot of you will struggle to keep the card in place when you first try this drill. Don't worry, that's okay. It's to be expected in many cases. This is not going to be something that you find easy, and again, it's another reason why I want you doing these exercises slowly to begin with, without a ball, and trying to hit the ground. That's another thing that you may well struggle with when you're trying this. The first few times you try this exercise, you might struggle to hit the ground, because to deliver the right arm back in this condition where it's slightly flexed requires a particular amount of rotation and tilt of your body, which you may not currently have. And it may also be the reason that your body motion, it being so poor, is why your right arm tends to maybe straighten too much, gets the shaft out too far away from you, and you would drop the card. So putting the card back in place, starting out with some dry drills and some swings just to hit the ground, and then as you build up from there, just start chipping some balls out there with the slower swing, keeping the card in place. You probably won't be able to get much further through than this without dropping the card. So if you start finding you're swinging further and you drop the card, don't be too concerned about that. My big preference here and my big focus here for this exercise is the motion of this arm throughout the backswing, into transition, and just into delivery. So don't be too concerned if you drop it on the forward swing. I wouldn't say you should be hitting full shots with this exercise to start with though. Do keep the speed down to begin with. It's a really nice way to train the shaft, plane and motion around your body. I see all sorts of crazy funky swings on a daily basis where we've got arms and limbs lifting, shafts getting into all sorts of different conditions, and over a period of 10 shots, a golfer might hit one good one, and they're looking at that one shot, maybe clinging on to that one shot a little bit too much, thinking if they just hit enough balls, they'll be able to make that one shot happen more often. The reality is that one shot, that one good shot that you're hitting with that really non-functional swing is the anomaly, okay? That's the one bad shot. It's the one shot you really shouldn't hit given the current state of the technique. And it's a much truer reflection of the other 9 shots that are a truer reflection of your current mechanics. So I would recommend that if you really are struggling to build the consistency that you're looking for in your game, learning how to move this trail arm throughout the backswing, the transition, and the downswing will help you to present and deliver a shaft that is much more repeatable, much more functional, and build that consistent swing that you're looking for. Guys, as always, thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you found it useful and informative as always. This one was maybe a little bit more detailed and complex than some, but hopefully clear enough, concise enough, and the drills simple enough. This is something you can give a go at home or at the driving range. Do let me know how you got on. If you like the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, I'd love you to join. Please click that subscribe button. And if you do have any thoughts on this video, the exercise with the right arm, and any other videos you'd like to see, please do drop a comment in the section below. Until next time, guys, have a great week. Enjoy your practice and your golf if you're getting to play, and I'll be back with another video very soon.